Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
The race for the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada is on. Both frontrunners launched their campaigns last week. Chrystia Freeland, former Deputy Prime Minister, longtime Cabinet Minister, runs on her near decade of experience in government, especially when dealing with President Donald Trump. Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada governor, positions himself as party outsider, bringing change and business acumen to the Liberal brand. Last week, we saw two very different campaign launches, one in suburban Edmonton, one in urban Toronto. How did it go? There was good, and there was bad, and a difficult path is ahead for both candidates. I'm David Smith, and this is The Big Story.
I'm back home in Edmonton to declare my candidacy for Leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada.
Mark Carney introduced himself to fellow Liberals and Canadians last Thursday at a community center in his hometown of Edmonton. The event was not a stellar showing. It wasn't a complete disaster. Carney didn't fail, per se, but it was underwhelming. Part of the problem may be how much the media had built up his candidacy ahead of time. Carney came into this race with a lot of expectations on him already. A lot has been made of his credentials. Former governor of the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis, governor of the Bank of England during Brexit, not to mention high-profile businessmen sitting on multiple boards of directors for billion-dollar companies like Brookfield Asset Management and Bloomberg. At a time when the cost of living and the economy are top issues for voters, all of those expectations preceded Carney as he walked to the stage at his campaign launch. Once he took the mic and began to speak, his lack of political experience was on full display. One columnist in the Toronto Star wrote, quote, "Holy heck, that Mark Carney launch was a letdown." In the Globe and Mail, a headline read, quote, "Carney staked out ground, but his first day didn't dazzle." And for those of us who watched Carney's first campaign speech live, it was obvious from the get-go he might be more comfortable in the boardroom than he is on the political stage. A campaign launch should be an energetic event. It should inspire supporters. It should be inspiring to listen to. There should be lots of pauses for raucous applause and cheering. In that regard, Carney's opening pitch fell flat.
Good old times, my friends, are over. Our times are anything but ordinary. The system, it's not working as it should. And it's not working as it could. People are anxious. No wonder. Too many are falling behind. Too many young people can't afford a home. Too many people can't find a doctor.
He read notes on a lectern with more than a few pregnant pauses between lines. He was monotone at times. The pace of the speech dragged. Here's the thing. Mark Carney spent a career as a central banker, and he was a good one. The problem with that is that he sounds like he's a central banker, and there's no requirement for charisma in that role. A speech in the boardroom is not the same as a speech on the campaign trail. Political communication is a skill set in and of itself. It's an art form. There's a very healthy industry of communications professionals who make their living teaching powerful, capable people like Mark Carney how to communicate in a way that will motivate people to support them politically. But learning new skills is hard, even for very competent and capable people. And this leadership race is happening on a compressed timeline. Carney is up against the clock to find his voice as a public figure. On the upside, for the Carney campaign, the substance of his speech was better than its delivery. What he said was better than how he said it. Carney has at least correctly identified the mood of the public. Change. This will be a change election. This election will be about what kind of change people want to see. The kind of change that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives represent, or the kind of change Mark Carney represents, if he's chosen as Liberal leader. On that front, Carney did have some good messages.
Just as Pierre Poilievre's soundbites won't deliver for Canadians, we can't achieve our full potential with the ideas of the far left. They too often see government as the solution to every problem, with a reflex to spend and subsidize that just treats the symptoms of the problems, but doesn't cure the disease.
Those are some strong political messages. Carney's positioning himself as someone on the outside, somebody who hasn't been in the government for the past 9 years and disagrees with how they've been governing the country. Carney says he'll be laser focused on one thing: growing the economy. That's a solid, centrist Liberal message. That's the kind of message that could very well appeal to disaffected Liberal voters, blue Liberals, business Liberals, Liberals who may feel like they no longer have a home in the Liberal Party, people who may not have voted in the next election if Trudeau were still leading the party, but might vote for Mark Carney if he is. These are the right ideas for a new Liberal leader, but do people want to hear them coming from Mark Carney? Is he believable when he says these things? That's the key question Liberal supporters will be looking to answer when they decide whether Mark Carney is the best choice to lead their party. Does Mark Carney have the ability to build a political movement around himself, around his brand, his experience, and his ideas? A movement to rival the movement that Pierre Poilievre has so successfully built. Based on Carney's first test at his campaign launch, he has a long way to go before he will be seen as a rival to Pierre Poilievre's popularity. A key to success for Carney will be convincing people that he actually is an outsider and not a Trudeau Liberal. He represents change for the party and wasn't a part of the government that had led the country for the past 9 years. That may be a difficult task, with the deep-pocketed Conservative Party already running attack ads against him. There's a lot of ammunition there for the Conservatives when it comes to linking Carney to Trudeau. For example, Carney did sign on to be an advisor to the Trudeau government last year. He has a long public history promoting and defending carbon taxes. Until recently, he was living and working in Europe. All of these themes you can expect to come out of advertising from the Conservative Party.
Mark Carney is back from Europe
Speaking as a European,
to continue what Justin Trudeau started.
a steady increase in the price of carbon. Carbon prices have been applied sparingly. They've been set far too low.
He even called Trudeau's carbon tax a model for others. So no matter what he calls it,
Effectively a shadow carbon price, or price on pollution,
you're going to keep paying.
in some form of carbon tax.
Carbon tax Carney. He's just like Justin.
And if you think that's the only attack ad the Conservative Party has ready to go, don't kid yourself, there will be dozens more just like it. The Conservatives will do everything they can to link Carney to Trudeau. And it's not the hardest job in the world for them when there are plenty of sound bites like this floating around on the internet.
I have been talking with Mark Carney for years now about getting him to join federal politics. I think he would be an outstanding addition at a time when Canadians need good people to step up in politics.
If Mark Carney is such an outsider, why has Justin Trudeau been trying to recruit him for years? That's a very basic question that Carney will have to answer while knocking on doors and on the debate stage with Pierre Poilievre. But these are early days. There is time for him to find his footing. There's just not a lot of it. So, for the Carney campaign, an okay start, but not the fireworks a lot of people were expecting or maybe hoping for. And then there's Chrystia Freeland. In stark contrast with Mark Carney's campaign as an outsider, Freeland is the ultimate insider. She's been with the Trudeau government since day one, loyal lieutenant, deputy prime minister, and held the most powerful cabinet portfolio, Minister of Finance, since 2020. Her campaign launch was Sunday at a Boys and Girls Club in her downtown Toronto riding. It got off to a very, very bad start. As soon as Chrystia Freeland took the stage, the event was immediately disrupted by protesters.
I am so glad to be here at the St. Albans Boys and Girls Club today.
At one point, protesters got onto the stage and held a large banner that read, "Freeland, Deputy Gravedigger." Another protester crashed the stage, later holding a large Palestinian flag. The protesters were targeting Freeland's event because they disagree with the Trudeau government's foreign policy on the war between Israel and Hamas. Freeland displayed impressive composure as she was interrupted again and again for more than 20 minutes.
In my office in Ottawa, I have a beautiful painting of a Canadian flag made by those $1 in the first protest. Important, and we are a free country. We're a free country, and one of the great things about our country is that people are free to express dissenting points of view. Let's be respectful of democracy, and let's be respectful of the kids at this Boys and Girls Club.
There's no beating around the bush. That was a total disaster for the Freeland campaign. It's the worst case scenario for doing any kind of live political event. There were no protesters at Mark Carney's campaign launch. Nobody rushed the stage on him or banged on the doors while he was speaking. But Mark Carney hasn't been the face of an increasingly unpopular government. The protesters crashing Freeland's launch are symptomatic and symbolic of her greatest challenge, distancing herself from her own record as part of the Justin Trudeau government. Freeland finally did launch into her speech in earnest, starting with her backstory, growing up in Alberta in a farming community as the daughter of a Ukrainian immigrant, her road to Ivy League University, and her time as a journalist in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. She retold the story of how she joined Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party in 2013 and went on to join the Trudeau government after the 2015 election. Again, if Mark Carney is an outsider, Chrystia Freeland, the ultimate insider. That may be why Freeland is positioning her campaign totally different than Mark Carney. Her campaign is built around the central issue of dealing with Donald Trump.
I led the fight to save NAFTA and Canadian jobs, even when the Conservatives wanted me to back down.
Freeland was Canada's negotiator when NAFTA was renegotiated in Trump's first term. She will be leaning heavily on that experience to convince Liberals she is the right person to lead them in the next election. That's a section of Chrystia Freeland's resume that does not appear on Mark Carney's. Freeland is the only candidate in this race who has experience negotiating with a Trump administration. That is seemingly her biggest strength. And she is accurately tapping into Canadians' anxiety about a possible trade war with the U.S. and what that will mean for people's pocketbooks and the Canadian economy. This is a good strategy for Freeland. It allows her to focus her campaign around looking forward rather than backward. That will be critical, because if her campaign isn't about looking into the future, all of the focus will be on Freeland's biggest weakness, her biggest liability, and that is her record. 9 years in the Trudeau government, the last 5 as Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister. Freeland's biggest challenge will be answering for the Liberal record, which has landed them at an all-time low in the polls. A good way to distance herself from that liability is by changing the conversation, making this election about Donald Trump and a trade war, rather than change from the status quo in Ottawa.
Our country is facing what could well be an existential threat. Tomorrow, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as President of the United States. He has threatened to hit Canada with 25% tariffs on everything we sell to the U.S. He wants to steal our jobs and drive away investment.
She announced a very specific policy right out of the gate. As Prime Minister, she says she will respond to any tariffs Trump puts on Canadian goods with dollar-for-dollar reciprocal tariffs on American goods. Freeland, like Carney, said that the Liberal Party needs to be laser-focused on growing the economy.
Good jobs, homes they can afford, and great care for their kids. They want a government that is as careful with Canada's money as Canadians are with their own.
But what she didn't say was how her approach to that would differ from what she has been doing as Minister of Finance since 2020. Everything that's wrong with the Canadian economy right now, inflation, interest rates, unemployment, slow growth, stagnant wages, it all happened on her watch as a member of Justin Trudeau's cabinet since 2015. What's different now? She will have to come up with a way to answer that question if she wants to outflank Mark Carney on his economic message. Another thing Freeland did not clearly address in her speech was the carbon tax. Freeland has spent 6 years as a Trudeau government cabinet minister defending the tax and voting to increase it. There have been reports that Freeland will make getting rid of the carbon tax part of her campaign platform. But at her campaign launch, she was asked by a reporter to explain her position on the policy, and this is what she said.
I think we all know we have to fight against climate change. We all get that. We need to do it for our kids. We need to do it for the planet. Liberals believe in that, and that is a fight that has to continue. But it is also the case that we need to get better at listening to Canadians and at listening to what Canadians are telling us. And we have heard very clearly from Canadians in provinces where there is a consumer-facing price on carbon that they don't like it. That's something that we have to listen to. Democracy means when people tell you something, you have to listen. And I will say, our party hasn't been good enough at that. That has to change, and I am going to change that.
She didn't say specifically that she is going to get rid of the carbon tax, even though sources close to her campaign have been telling the media that she will. Why the disconnect there? If her plan is to scrap the tax, why not say out loud, I plan to scrap the carbon tax? That is a basic question that she will have to come up with an answer to if she wants to hold her own on an election debate stage. So, neither of the frontrunners will win any awards for best campaign launch of all time, but they are now off and running. Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney are the Liberal leadership hopefuls to watch. The race is on in earnest. Party supporters have until January 27th to register to be eligible to vote, and the Liberal Party will select its new leader on March the 9th. Barring any unexpected changes, it will likely be either Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney. In the latest national poll done by Leger before the campaign launch events, Mark Carney had 27% support from Liberal voters, Chrystia Freeland close behind at 21%. It will be a tough battle between those two contenders. But much tougher still is what awaits them afterwards, fighting a general election against Pierre Poilievre and the Popular Conservative Party. And that was the big story for today. Thank you so much for listening. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. We love hearing from you. You can find us on the Seeker app or on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Until next time, I'm David Smith. Thank you for listening.